views expressed are our own and do not represent the opinions of any employers, organisations, or clients for whom we work. Any recommendations or advice given in this podcast may or may not be right for you depending on your circumstances, so please bear this in mind before taking any action. Charting Tracks is brought to you by Chris O'Gorman, Amir Yaqub, and Ben Hennessy-Garside. Chris is a digital marketing strategist and digital manager. He's worked previously for Sony Music and was the head of digital at Capitol Records UK. He currently runs a digital marketing agency and develops music artists, working on brand development and marketing strategy. Amir is a record producer, Grammy Award-winning engineer, a co-owner of Bison Productions recording studios in East London, and the director of Garnish Music Production School in London. Ben, who is me, I is Ben, is a singing coach, multi-instrumentalist, composer and producer. In the past, I've worked in music instrument retail, as a record label scout, a live sound engineer, and I'm currently a lecturer at Leeds Conservatoire, teaching voice to popular music students, alongside being a dad and husband. This is the 4th episode of Charting Tracks, and is the 3rd of 3 in which we discuss ways to support people in their progression as music practitioners.
Okay, so Ben and Chris, we have spoken obviously about growth. There are going to be times when your growth is stunted, halted, what we commonly know as writer's block in the world of creativity particularly. But, you know, it can also be extended to things like burnouts and stuff like that. And largely we could say that this falls under the umbrella of how to sustain creativity in the face of obstacles. I'm going to open up and ask you first about some of your techniques, and then I'll follow up with anything, well, from a personal perspective, I guess, but also just to follow up on your point as well. So let's start with Ben. Ben, what do you think about sustaining creativity?
So, I mean, this is great because it actually harks back to some of the stuff we've already talked about. Often we get blocks when we're being too critical of ourselves. And we've moved into this kind of judgmental, there are good things and bad things, and often it's linked to this question of motivation. If you can make something playful rather than judgmental, you're going in the right track. What do we mean by that? Well, throw in a little bit of randomness. So maybe you're writing a song and you just can't come up with an idea. Grab a book off a shelf, flick through it, find a page, point randomly, you know, like I say, make it playful, and that's the word that you're going to write the song about. So there's that. That's one thing, is kind of unlock and loosen the whole thing. The other reason, though, sometimes people can get caught up is because they haven't defined their boundaries well enough. So this is a kind of like, there's something quite paradoxical about this. It's like you've got your play space, but you need to be able to play within a space. Right? So sometimes putting a kind of a conceptual box around it will help as well, right? Making the decision, say, right, well, I'm going to write a 3-minute pop song. Okay, great. Then you can go and listen to some 3-minute pop songs and say, look at the forms. That's going to be the form. That's going to be the structure. Yeah. So I know there's going to be an intro, a verse, a chorus, a verse, a chorus, some kind of bridge section, 2 choruses, an outro, right? That's your kind of standard pop form, right? Oh, with some pre-choruses in as well.
Yeah.
Dotted about the place.
I love a pre-chorus personally.
Yeah. Right.
It's like, I just don't hit me with the chorus too quickly. Just, I don't want to build up to it, okay?
Yeah. They definitely have their place. So then when you know your form, it's like, okay, well, now I know what I need to populate here. Curiosity is the other one. So as well as which is also linked in with this playful thing. It's like you're just trying to understand the world. Curiosity you can create by asking open-ended questions of yourself, right? So you get your form. You've done your research. You've got your form, and then you go, oh well, like what do I? Great. So I know the structure, but what do I do now? Well, you can start asking some questions. You can say, well, who's the protagonist in the song? Just come up with an answer for that, right? If you're not too harsh on yourself, just what's the first thing that comes to mind? Who's the first person you see? Turn the TV on. Who's the first person? Right, that's that there. Yeah, it's like, so if no one's coming to mind, then you let the universe decide for you. Okay, so that's the question. Who's the protagonist? Oh, it's that person. Well, okay, who are they talking to? There's another little opening. Well, they could be talking to, they could be talking to, I don't know, their lover who they now despise because they've gone off and slept with their best friend. Could be a dinosaur with a jellyfish for a head. I don't know, like whatever. Like pick somebody. So you got a protagonist and you know who they're talking to, and then well, what are they saying? Again, pick something.
Yeah.
Why are they saying it? So asking these open-ended questions, whatever they might be, will help build some curiosity. And often, when we're in like an open and curious place, then the creativity kind of comes in. It's when there's pressure that we're either applying to ourselves or that's coming to us from outside, where we need to achieve a certain thing, and we're in the kind of editing phase, right? In most creative acts, there's initial creativity, and then there's editing and narrowing. There's opening and narrowing, and opening and narrowing, or opening and closing is another way of talking about it. Same kind of thing. If you've got too much closing, too much narrowing, too much squashing, too much tightness, you're gonna be blocked. Too much openness, there's going to be too many options. It's going to be analysis paralysis, and you never get anywhere. So it's
there's a sweet spot, isn't there?
It's finding the right balance, and maybe you need to switch from one to the other and back and forth.
Yeah, definitely.
Or maybe you can find a place where it's just the right, and simultaneously you can hold both.
Yeah.
So
because having a framework can be helpful, but then it can also it can hamstring you, and then you're kind of like, it can prevent you. It can prevent you having another idea or thinking about something a different way because you're just focusing on that. I think for me, when it's like coming up with like campaign initiatives or some big creative digital campaign launch for an album or for a single or something, a lot of the times you kind of go. You have that thing when you first start. It's very similar to, I imagine, to kind of writing a song or to composing or to create. It's that starting point. It's like that blank page.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's and I think then also some of the things that probably come into things like expectations. That's the thing like, oh, this campaign we did for this like really went down well, so let's try and do something like that again. And already you're sort of hamstringing yourself because then you're like, oh, I have to do something like that on that platform. And then, so actually the thing that tends to break that is actually, it's like you say, is switching up the routine. It's whether that's like physically standing up from your desk and going away and actually getting it. And that's kind of one of the things that we kind of did, that I've always done consistently with like teams that I've worked with is, get out, stand away from your desk, stand away from that computer, from that blank screen, and get in a room with a load of post-it notes and just whack the most crazy. The other thing is actually the editing of yourself as you're going along. That idea's not going to work. The artist will never go for that. Management are going to hate that. Before you've even allowed the idea to form, you've already started editing yourself and coming up with all the reasons why that won't work. And actually, when I've sat down for like the team, whether it's like me and like the other digital team, some of the artist management team as well, or the PR person as well, it's actually saying, look, whatever happens in this room, these ideas that are coming up now, they're just going to go and post it and go around the wall. They may never go anywhere, and actually, we'll probably have to come up with 50 ridiculous ideas and get one or two ones that are actually really solid and really good. And that's just the process that we have to go through. And actually giving yourself the permission to do that and not have to think about the logistics, not having to think about, can we actually do that? Because a lot of the times when you are having to deliver the logistics, before you've even allowed the idea to form, you've already said, no, that can't work because we'd have to do this and this. So actually, I suppose giving yourself the permission to come up with the most ridiculous ideas, knowing that they may not see the light of day and they don't need to, but they're part of the process. I think that's, for me, the thing that sort of helps unlock those ideas and kind of helps get around that sort of creative block that you might have.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously, I think as part of your growth and as part of your development, you have to understand that. I mean, these days are not going to be like very rare. They're going to be more often than you're going to want them to be, right? So,
Part of
like,
it, yeah.
yeah,
Part
it
of
kind of
the-
is. It kind of is, yeah. So, look, imagine someone goes to work and they go, I had a great day at work, and they did that for all 300 and however many days there are in a year. I can't
Absolutely,
remember.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, is it? So it's like we're doing the same thing, but some of the stuff that you guys have been talking about, and Ben talking a lot about looking to other places. It reminds me of something that I heard called the creativity switch, and this is probably Googleable, and I'm probably going to mess it up, but my experience of it is, just imagine you are going to work and you're taking the same route to work every day and you're seeing the same things every day. So if you're in a car, you go left there, right there, you go down that road and you do a left and you go right, and all of a sudden it's like you're at work. And obviously the first time you do it it's like, oh, look at that thing and blah, 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 blah. And then you've done it about 10 times and you're on autopilot.
Yeah.
You're kind of going that same way in your path and your journey to work. The creativity switch is going, I'm going to take a different turn today. It's literally one different turning and all of a sudden you are seeing something new. It's kind of like, again, going back to opening up new options via generator functions and looking at the mesh, and new nodes that are now around you. You go, I took a right there and oh my god, that coffee shop looks so good. I wonder what their coffee's like. I'm just gonna, tomorrow what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the same turning, I'm gonna jump out and get coffee from there, which sparks a new conversation with someone, which might give you further inspiration and so on and so forth. The creativity switch is not you physically doing that.
Yeah.
It's you doing that in terms of what you're doing. So I obviously compose a lot at the piano primarily, or I will pull up a DAW and I will, load up some drums. Instead, why don't I pick up an instrument that I might not be able to play very well? For instance, this guitar behind me, I can't play guitar very well at all. And I'm going to do something different, because I'm not going to be bound by the limitations of my hands falling in that same place naturally, naturally playing in the key of E flat minor, because that's what I genuinely gravitate towards, is the key that I know the best. No, it's going to give me something new. It's going to give me something different. Going back to what Ben was saying about opening a book and just pointing there, there's a book that I have in the studio called You Are a Circle. I got it for Christmas from one of my good mates and who I work with creatively as well. And it's a very similar concept to Oblique Strategies by Brian Eno. So Brian Eno, you know him, has a set of cards, essentially, which were like, if you were working with an artist and there was writer's block, you'd be like, take one of these cards, and this card might say something like, use the studio as an instrument, and this would spark creativity. It would be something new, something a bit random, something like, oh, I didn't expect this to happen, And I think, kind of coming back to what Ben said as well, one of the big things is, for me personally, playfulness is just like, that's everything. Obviously I'm immensely blessed to be able to play a lot of the time in my day-to-day roles, but there are frameworks, there are forms, that limitations to that I have to impose on that as well. So I can't just be like, oh, you know what I'm going to do, I'm just going to sit here for 5 days and make some beats. That's not really going to work. Yeah, if I had all the time and the money in the world, that might work, but also it would be boring by day 3, because I'd be like, oh, you know what? I've been making beats for 3 days and not once have I thought about any lyrical stuff or any melodic stuff or whatever. I've just been beats, right? Yeah. So limitations and frameworks, I like to personally work in 4-hour chunks, right? So if I'm doing a thing, I think I can always get the best results, most of the time, working within 4-hour chunks. After that point, I'm drifting. And trust me, I mean, 4 hours is like pushing it for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like 4 minutes and I'll be drifting. So I think you're right. The limitations, and also one major thing, editing is a process that we are going to have to do, but it should come later.
Later, yeah.
A famous example of this in my eyes is Yesterday was written by Paul McCartney, obviously, and you know, he just put it down because he liked the chords and the melody and everything. But the song was called Scrambled Eggs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's so funny, that, isn't it? Yesterday was scrambled.
exactly, Paul. Come on, Paul.
I just love that.
So he's just like, you know, it's all good. If he had edited that too early and gone, oh my God, what kind of a title is Scrambled Eggs?
I need the lyrics before I can record.
Yeah.
Exactly. It would have been stifled. Yeah.
If he did that, we wouldn't have Yesterday, which is one of my favorite Beatles songs, right? But we wouldn't have it. Like, and if he'd gone, I'm editing this really early, I've been very critical of myself, I have to have the whole song in place, you know, like you say. I have to have the whole song in place before I can even validate it as being worthy of recording or whatever. Mate, you're blocking your own blessings, right? Editing too early is one of those things that is just like shooting yourself in your foot. And I just think when it comes to creativity, there's so much pressure that we put on ourselves. One of the key concepts that I learned to just get rid of, and I can't just remember the name of the book, but I will let you know, is I think it's called The Creativity Habit or something. It's by Twyla Tharp, and she was a dancer, right? And she was like, I used to just sit around and wait for inspiration to just strike, and you know, I was just like, 5 o'clock, it must be time for me to be inspired because I'm sitting here and doing this and blah 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 blah. She's like, of course 7 o'clock came and there was no inspiration. So what she did,
any minute now, come in.
What she did was she went, I'm going to go to the gym in the morning. She's obviously a dancer. I'm going to go to the gym in the morning, and straight after I'm going to work, and I'm just going to work. I'm just going to do something, right? And, you know, I might not be here inspired or particularly creative, but it doesn't matter. I'm there. I'm showing up. I'm turning up. I'm doing it, and I'm not waiting for inspiration to hit me like lightning. I'm going to inspiration. I'm going to creativity. And she might just be, you know, just practicing along to one of her old choreo songs or whatever. But she's doing something. And generally, when you remove all of these kind of external things about creativity being this divine intervention that has to happen only when other people allow, you'll find that actually you're more creative than ever, because you're not treating it like it's something that is special. You're treating it like something that is regular, and in that regularity you get special things happen.
That's funny, because I know there's a Nelly Furtado interview where she's talking about that. She actually said that on her most recent album she had the worst sort of block, and had quite a bit of time away from the industry as well, and had sort of quite severe block and didn't really know how. She was like, I can't remember how to write a song anymore. I don't. And basically just took a lot of time off, and just went to go and work in her friend's record shop, and then went to work in another friend's charity shop, and just literally was just like, I'm just going to do something else that isn't remotely involved. It's not, you know, and just like the process of, you know, bringing up stuff on the till and tagging stuff, and, you know, just her brain. She then started finding that, like, I think she said something about the cash register or something. It was like the percussive nature of the cash register, then started making go and then she ended up writing something from that, and it's just because a different part of the brain's working.
I mean, exactly.
Working,
it reminds me of a writer that I worked with maybe like 3, 4, 5 years ago now, and he was like, oh yeah, I heard the birds singing outside my window, so I just recorded them. And then he bought that Birdsong into the DAW. I think he was using Logic. Doesn't matter what he was using, but there are other DAWs available. He put auto-tune on it, and he started to use this Birdsong that was auto-tuned, and he was like, oh, I really like that melody, I like that melody, I like that melody. And he was writing songs, and it's just crazy what actually, when you think about inspiration, where you can find it and how around us it is, just about unlocking those other options, isn't it? Rather than being like, I'm going to my guitar now and play this chord and play that chord, and you know.
And actually, like you were saying with this, I think it was the creativity switch.
Yeah.
That was saying. Actually, I've realized I didn't know it was called that, but we have done that in practice. And I remember actually, like with an artist that we're working on, which is like, what could be the worst idea that we can come up with for this band? Like the absolute worst thing. What would their fans hate the most? What would the band hate the most? What would be the most inappropriate, not remotely right things that we could come up with? And actually, by going through that process, we actually came up with some ideas. Well, actually, if we do it in that way, that could be really good.
Yeah.
So I have actually done that and not even realized I was doing it.
Yeah, you weren't even driving to work. You would just turn the car around, and I'm going up the M1 and coming back, and then I'll be at work.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool way of thinking about things, though.
There's a few things I just want to throw in here. I remember I heard Ryan Adams talking about this, and he says one key thing is like showing up.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that's coming up for me is this. Certainly, in the Western world, anyway, in the medieval era, music wasn't considered to be kind of the property of the individual creator. It was seen to be, and I think this was the same in the Islamic world as well. It was seen to be God speaking through the individual.
Right.
And I mean, you might believe in God or not, you know, whatever. But this, trying to kind of just for psychological, just to give yourself a little bit of weight relief, or just to take the load off a bit. Seeing kind of the muse as a kind of entity outside of yourself that either wants to engage or not.
Right.
Maybe it's a bit whimsical, but framing it in that way can help, because what that can mean is all you need to do is turn up, right? Which links back to what Ryan Adams was saying, which is just turn up, right? It's like set the room out, lay it out, get your instruments around you, make yourself comfortable. You know, maybe even that act, the first act, is physically setting up the space. Yeah, because you're getting out of you kind of like you're in a different. So set the space up, make it really easy for this muse, God, whatever you want to call it, to come in and come through you, and then sit there.
Yeah.
Right. He had a bunch of books that he kept there for doing the thing that I was talking about, which was, you know, getting books and just flipping through and then pointing to the place. But having like little knickknacks around, little things to play with, you know.
Funny, the showing up thing, because Diane Warren, the songwriter Diane Warren, does that as well. And she's like, says she has a place of work. She has like, I guess it's like a writing studio now. She's like, I go, and she goes every day. She's like, every day I'm gonna go, even if it's only for like an hour. I might not stay the whole day. She might have days when she's like, oh no. Generally, I think what she does is like the weekdays she does do 9 to 5. She's like, I'm going there 9 to 5, and then she might go for an hour at the weekend or something. But she's like, every single day I'm going there, I'm showing up. And I'll probably write a load of garbage that day. But every single day I'm going to have at least one song a day. Yeah. So by the end of the year, I'm going to have 365 new songs.
There you go.
Now, most of them are going to be garbage. But out of this 365, some of them are going to be pretty damn good.
Yeah, I mean,
act of showing up. That's
absolutely.
Absolutely. You know,
Absolutely.
And the thing is that she's a jobbing songwriter, so that's kind of how she works. Others, it's like, I need to go on a research trip or something like that, and I'm going to go and, you know, take in loads. I'm going to go to, I don't know, Barcelona or somewhere and look at all the Gaudi buildings or something, and that's their way of, you know, again, it's that, but that kind of is showing up. That is, it's not necessarily there. I'm there with my pen and paper and I'm ready to write, but it's, it's sort of this idea of going through, like a field that needs to have a fallow period, basically. But then it's replenishing. It doesn't look like it is, but it's replenishing. And when you're going and doing that, you're replenishing the well, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
To then be able to.
Yeah, definitely.
Write about it.
And when you mention travel, particularly, many of the big clients that I've worked with who are from America, obviously you're like, well, what are you doing here, bruv? Do you know what I mean? Like, this is like, the weather's worse than in LA, that's for sure. But also, what's the hype? They're just like, we really love London. It's such a nice vibe and all of this kind of stuff. And it's just, they're flipping a switch.
Even that though, the weather being
switch.
Different is like,
absolutely.
That's
and
just
even
set
though
a different
shit,
mood.
I mean, it's crap weather most of the time. 9 months of the year in London, you're getting rain. Yeah. I used to be baffled when they came here. I was like, why would you want to soak yourself? But obviously, it's just like that's a creativity switch for them.
Yeah, exactly. Switching it up.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, when you talk as well about particularly someone like Diane Warren, let's take that example. Diane Warren turning up and doing 365 songs, she knows that she's going to fail. She knows.
She's not, and she doesn't care. She's not judging herself for that.
Yep.
She's not going, every single one of these songs has to be the biggest hit. Not every single one of these has to be Unbreak My Heart.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is the thing. Perfect being the enemy of the good.
The enemy of good, yeah.
And just not allowing yourself to go, oh yeah. Well, if I write a song and it's crap, it's okay. I'm going to let myself off because I've got 364 more songs to come. Imagine on the 1st of January, she comes back with a big hangover from a New Year's Eve party. And she's like, oh my God, I just sort of wrote this crap song. When she writes a crap song, she's not going, well, crap by her standards. She's not
probably
going.
Still great, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. She's not going, oh my God, I'm the shittest songwriter in the world or anything like that.
I don't have it anymore. I lost it.
Yeah, I'm going to give up. I'm going to give up tomorrow. She goes, I've got 364 songs left to write this year. Let's give it another go.
And as she's leaving the studio that day, she switches off the lights and she's like, I didn't have it today.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I will. Well, maybe not. Maybe the day after. But
exactly.
It's gonna come back.
Yeah, you win some, you lose some, and I suppose perfect being the enemy of good or great or whatever. Failure being inevitable are two things that will be part of your growth.
Yeah,
that's what I feel. Like, growth doesn't really happen inside of your comfort zone. Yeah, it happens outside of it, right?
And also, success doesn't really mean anything if you haven't had the sort of the failures along the way,
Yeah, because you've learnt nothing.
And some days, you have a campaign. Like, from my perspective, some days you do a campaign that kind of, you have a number one. You have those weeks when you got the number one single in the number one album. You got, you just won a Brit Award or a Grammy or you whatever. And then there's days when you're like, okay, the biggest accomplishment I'm going to have today is managing to stir my tea with an actual teaspoon instead of a knife or fork. And that's fine. Anyone that worked at Sony will know that. Never a damn teaspoon.
I love it. What do you think, Ben? Any wisdom to impart on these topics?
This thing about letting yourself off the hook, I think is really, really important. Just a little kind of educational anecdote that's coming to mind that's kind of linked, where they've done studies into students and whether they're going to engage with feedback or not. One of the things that causes problems is when they're given like a grade. So there's something about the act of judgment and putting them inside a box that says you have got an A or a B or a C or a whatever, or something in the act of providing them with that numerical judgment actually undermines their ability to act on the feedback, like the written feedback the more kind of qualitative kind of try doing this thing next time, try doing that thing next time. Why don't you improve or work hard on this area to improve your grade for the next time? If they know what their grade is, that stuff goes. So why is that linked? Well, it's this question of judgment. If you're being like the teacher and you're giving yourself like a box, like that was a grade B performance, rather than keeping that openness of this could have been done better, that could have been done better, that could have been done better. There's something about pointing to action rather than labeling with a good or a bad.
Yeah, definitely.
It links with lots of what we've talked about today, but it's also like another little point in that direction about give yourself some space.
Yeah.
Give yourself some space.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I would say
I think that's all I've got to say on,
Yeah.
really.
I would say also the more you make, the less you care as well. So like, let's say you are doing a song and it's being submitted for an assignment or whatever, and you know that you've made great songs in the past and maybe you did get a bad grade this time. It's kind of like being an artist and releasing really good songs before, and then you release a song which maybe it wasn't your best song, right? And the feedback on social media is not the best, right? But you don't actually care because you know you've made great songs in the past and you know you're going to make great songs again in the future. It's just that this is a little bump in the road, What Ben says is absolutely correct about giving yourself that space, right?
Yeah.
You got to give yourself the room to breathe. You got to give yourself the room to experiment, to maybe fail as well, right? You got to have that kind of flexibility with all of it.
I just wanted to raise, because there's this thing that gets said. There's this kind of sense often with people is like, like you're only as good as your last song.
Oh yeah.
Or you're only as good as your last gig.
Yeah.
And I wondered because that seems to be kind of there's this theme of how tough everything is, and I wanted to get your thoughts on like how true is that? If it is true, does it even matter? I know from like a creative place, that stuff is worthless. Like if you've got an artist and they're creative and their last single bombed, and you walk into the room and you say you're only as good as that last single, hand on hip, like you're doing nothing for their career. In fact, what you're doing is you're just hammering more and more nails into the coffin for them.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not going to help them become more creative by applying more pressure.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So what do we do about that? Because there's so many people hanging around the music industry happy to just tear a strip. Like that's a problem.
Well, a lot of it in the music industry as well is like people think that failure, they treat it almost like it's contagious. So it's like, I don't want to be associated with that project because I'm going to catch it. I'm going to catch failure.
Good point.
And it's also kind of a bit of there is something that really is rife in the music industry is pointing blame. It has to be, it's because that didn't work. It's good. You know what? I would have got it on the radio, but that didn't work in that part of it, or we didn't have it. It's almost like because it's so sort of, you can put all the right elements in place for something to be successful, and it's still it just doesn't connect. The magic just isn't there. And then there's times you put everything in place and then it does connect. But I think that because it's there's that unknown element, people are always trying to inoculate themselves against the inevitable failure of what they see the project as. There is a bit of let's just blame another part of the promotional team and be like, my part went well, so it's fine. And it's like, yeah, I get the temptation to do that, but it's like it doesn't really help anyone. It doesn't,
And you're right. It seems to be everywhere, right? It's like you've got artists blaming their manager,
Yeah.
and blaming the producer, and blaming the label, and then you've got labels blaming
Yeah,
the artist,
marketing. This is
blaming the
A&R.
market.
A&R will blame the marketing team.
Yeah,
Marketing will blame the song. They'll be like, well, the song wasn't good enough. A&R will be like, oh, the campaign wasn't good enough. The artist will be like, oh, it's the label. The label will be like, oh, it's management. They didn't let us have enough access to the artist to do enough promo stuff. Oh, the artist wanted to do this new sound. It's like everyone's because the thing is, it's like when you have that, you're sort of every single artist, when you have your moment of, even the ones that really, really make it. And again, making it really means very different things to lots of different people.
Yeah, of course.
But if you take it to mean, chart success, sales and streaming figure success, awards, and then just exposure, just kind of, I think people have a perception of success meaning every time I turn on my TV, I seem to see this artist, I seem to see an advert for their album, they seem to all win all the awards, and every time I open a newspaper or a magazine, they're there. Constantly online, whenever I'm on my social media channels, I see an ad for their album. That's sort of the point where people like that is mainstream, like crossover success, and taking something like Ed Sheeran as an example of that. It's sort of like at that point where it's like, okay, that's success now. But even that artist is going to, you have your moment of real popularity. Maybe it lasts for 2 or 3 albums. With every single artist, there is then, it becomes at a certain point about managing decline, because you can't really maintain that intense level forever. It starts becoming like, something, because there's always something new coming through. So if you've really done a good job, what you have is you've built up this fan base, and that fan base will then stay with you. So it's no longer about being at the current thing, but it's like in terms of like the being the sort of the artist of the moment, the hot thing that moment, that is going to start tailing off, and then it becomes about managing decline. And it's about, when I say managing decline, that then sort of sounds like a really negative thing, but actually you're just moving into a different phase of your career, and then the phase of your career that you're moving into is got this really solid fan base that will really sustain me, and you can tour the world for the rest of your career. You can continue putting out albums, and based off that fan base alone, you probably won't even have to do very much marketing spend at all, promotional activity at all, and you'll have like a top 10 album like every time you release one, because you've done the work early on to build that fan base up. With every artist, there's going to be the point where it becomes about, you're on that sort of what would be perceived as downward trajectory or managing decline. I don't see it as downward trajectory. I say it's referred to as managing decline from an industry perspective, because album sales will be dropping, because you just won't be getting that that insane high number of albums that as you are at the peak of your career. But that doesn't mean that you're not selling. What will happen is it will just level out, and they'll be consistently doing the same album sales, or same streaming figures each time, same tour, be selling out the same kind of tour venues each time, because it will level off. And then you have your problem is artists don't, the fame monster kicks in, and then you like, I want to be that. Somebody like Lady Gaga's been on she's had the sort of sales dip, and she's had the sort of, maybe not quite the popularity dip, but certainly had the sales dip. And it's like, I'm going to go off and make a jazz album with Tony Bennett. What?
Yeah, it's true.
At which point the label's like, okay,
very true,
go off and do that. and now she's like riding high again. So it's a difficult one, because you could literally just say, oh, that's it, write them off, that's the downward slope, that's the decline. But does that mean that everything they did before doesn't have value? Does that mean that what they're going to do in the future doesn't have value? Does it mean that doesn't have value?
That's
Bob
it.
Dylan deciding to be electric on an album instead of what he's known for, being acoustic, is, impacted sales to a certain extent. It doesn't mean that wasn't an important piece of work. And also there's a bit of a rewriting of history. It's funny, because I know, like, with Tori Amos, what she was saying in her most recent book, the first album, I was like, oh, no one's going to buy this. It's it's a bit it's a bit too convoluted. There's a bit too many pianos on it. Let's take the pianos off and put guitars on. It's, that was kind of the sort of approach at the time. And eventually I think who was it? Doug Morris, I think it was, of Warner Group at the time, was like, no, okay, let's just break her in Europe first. A bit more open-minded. You can kind of, in the UK, you can kind of do Jules Holland and you'll be kind of everywhere almost, there's not so much different fractured radio stations that you're working. And they kind of had Kate Bush, so we can kind of make it work that way. And then it was seasoned with a bit of credibility from the UK and from Europe, and then actually ended up selling really well in America. But the first album, they thought, they were kind of like, we don't think it's going to work. And then it actually did well. And they're like, make that again, make that album again. And then like she'll go and put in the second album, like, no, can you just make the first one again? It's like, well, you didn't want me to make the first one that way. But then it's a hit. And then they're like, could just do that again, do the exact same thing again. And then they'll try something different and be like, no, do that again now.
Yeah.
So there's
so the question would be then, like, what do we, I mean, is your answer like you I think you alluded to earlier, which is like, get the goal right, like, no,
what does success look like? What does
success look like for you?
Yeah.
And include this decline, in inverted commas, decline period, in the plan up front.
If you're a serious artist and you're serious about having longevity, you have to know, and you have to account for the fact that there will be a period of your career where you are on the downward trajectory, or what's perceived to be a downward trajectory. And there's like a there's the pre-breaking the artist phase, then you break, and then you're everywhere, and then there's post-breaking, and that's when you settle into a maybe a slightly more stable pattern. You don't have quite the heat that you had at that moment, but actually you are very much and you might have moments of, that's when you might have like the song might be used in a soundtrack for the Bond film, and then you have a spike there, or you have a spike, so if you think you're going to be at the top of that heat scale your entire career, you're setting yourself up for a big disappointment.
To say the least. Oh my God.
Because it's riding a wave, and normally it's kind of good. There's going to be peaks and troughs in that career, but it's about defining what success looks like. Because if you're an artist, it's like, well, actually, people don't even know my name mainstream, but I sell out arenas. And there are loads of artists that can boast that. They're not household names. You're not going to see them necessarily on the official chart, but they'll sell out, maybe not arenas, but they'll be selling out Hammersmith Apollo's size venues consistently.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So to some people, that's success. To other people, it's like, no. If I'm not number one on the album charts and the single charts, if I'm not the most streamed artist on Spotify, the most watched artist on YouTube, then I'm not successful. And that, you know what? Fine, decide that if you want to decide that. But
yeah. So
set
the right goals.
Know what it is. Yeah. That success means. Be honest about it.
Yeah.
Because if you are like, no, I want to be the absolute very top, and I want to be the hottest artist of the moment, and I want to be riding high on all those streaming charts and everything, then be honest about it. If that's really what you want, then just be upfront about it and be honest about it, and at least.
And also be honest about the things you are going to have to do
to get there.
Get there, and also know that you might do all of the things and still not.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because just life.
Yeah.
Just because that's how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. That needs to be included then in the whole thought process.
And the strategy and the game plan that you put
together.
strategy
and the game plan.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Now more so than ever in music industry as well, when you're not going to make your living, you're not going to make the core amount of your money from streaming or from the physical recorded music product. It's not where you're going to make your money. Where you're going to make a living is through touring, merch, brand deals, experiences. So lots of like artists now do like sort of immersive kind of songwriting workshops with their fans, where they charge it's almost like a VIP experience basically, where it's a sort of high ticket item. So you can go away. I don't know. I don't think Ed Sheeran does this, but I'm just using him as an example, where you go and have a songwriting camp with Ed Sheeran for those he doesn't need to because so probably isn't going to do that. But it's about diversifying and finding ways to make a living and make a use your sort of music to have sort of ancillary revenue streams.
Yeah, I just want to really we've spent a long time on the industry, like the kind of traditional. I want to make it as a artist, writing original material in the charts. Kind of that's what we spent a lot of time talking about. But there's a whole world of music making that you can engage with that doesn't require that level of
most of it is. Yeah, most of it is. Most of the recorded music in the world is not done by, and that is a tiny percentage.
And
the charting artists, the mainstream.
Yeah, sure.
And they're not the ones that fuel the actual music streaming ecosystem. Actually, it's something like 70 or 80% is those kind of DIY artists and musicians and independent musicians.
But I mean that's even recorded, right?
Yeah.
I mean there's the heaps of other careers that you can get into that don't revolve around recording at all. I mean, we're in the middle of COVID, and over the past few days, there's been these marches by the live music industry. So who knows how things are going to look as far as that's concerned by the end of all of this stuff. But presuming things eventually get back to something like normality, you can make a decent living working as part of a wedding band, and you can be happy as Larry making your music, doing your thing, and if that's okay for you, then do that.
Also, there's a lot of kind of, I think, like people doing that kind of sort of the cruise ship entertainers or the kind of function gig circuit or something like that. Those bands and those acts are actually much more profitable businesses on the whole than the vast majority of recorded artists.
Oh yeah,
do not make
massively
for 3, 4, sometimes even 5 years. And the majority of them, a lot of them, never make profit. In fact, and they spend out actually, and that's it. Whereas wedding bands, function bands, and function artists and stuff can be profitable straight away.
Yeah,
got their equipment and stuff, and then great, I can charge this much for a gig, and then I'm profitable.
Of course, and remember that this was outlined in the Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. The Beatles were a function band in Hamburg for however long they were there for, and by actually doing something like that, you're getting paid to play, which is basically getting paid to practice, which is essentially you just perfecting your craft and becoming a better musician or artist or whatever. And there's always that side of things as well. You've got to be I know so many artists who are independent, doing releases and getting good attendance at their shows and all of this kind of stuff. And on the side, they might be doing gigs here and there, a wedding band thing or whatever it is. And they're actually solid musicians as well. They probably wouldn't be as solid if they
hadn't done it.
Not exactly. Yeah. So there's definitely no shame in that.
Yeah, and there's this thing as well about just building a portfolio career of a variety of different things. You might do some stuff that's not even music related.
Diversifying,
do a bit half and half. There are loads of ways of making it work. Consider all that in the act of making your plan.
Definitely.
And setting your goals.
Yeah. More so than ever now with the sort of democratization of music.
Yeah. Right.
That is more and more how, you're going to have to be, not even going to have to be, you have the opportunity to be. It's actually an exciting thing.
We've just spent ages talking about making a living in music, and we've got an entire podcast.
So we'll talk more about that on the next one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
and we can go into some kind of more details then.
We've got more to come, haven't we?
More to come. I just want to, before we wrap up, just ask any listeners or viewers, whatever, If you can subscribe, please do. If you can like, please like. If you can star or thumbs up, or as mentioned last time, we're going to be on a few different platforms. So use whatever way you can to kind of engage with us. Please, if you want to leave comments or ask questions, and there's a facility to do so on the platform that you use, please do. Show us love, and we'll show you some back.
See you next time.
Bye.
Until next time.
Ciao.